Okay, thank you again for everyone joining today's webinar on the Brazilian plant-based market. Before we dive in, I'd just like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. To start, we will send a recording of this presentation as well as slides to everyone who registered for this webinar. And secondly, our speakers will be available to answer questions during the last 15 minutes of this webinar. If you notice, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to submit questions into that Q&A box at any time during the webinar, and we will answer them at the Q&A session at the end. There's also a Zoom chat. We just ask that you keep the questions into the Q&A box because it's easier for us to keep track of them than when they're put inside the chat. All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. So the presenters for today's webinar, my name is Kyle Gahn. I'm a research analyst at GFI in GFI's US office. I work a lot in our market research as well as data analysis, trying to identify key insights and trends for the industry. Our other speaker today is Felipe Krelling. He's our corporate engagement coordinator in GFI Brazil. And he will be walking us through the majority of today's presentation. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not yet familiar with GFI, the Good Food Institute is a nonprofit 501c3 that is dedicated to accelerating the shift to a sustainable, healthy, and just food system. We're funded by philanthropy. We've earned GuideStar's Platinum Seal Transparency, which is an honor obtained by less than 1% of nonprofits in both 2019 and 2020. Our organization employs over 90 staff around the globe with 3 key programmatic departments. In science and technology, our team of PhD scientists work to advance and open source the foundational science of alternative proteins. Our corporate engagement team builds relationships with the world's largest food manufacturers, meat companies, restaurants, and retailers to help them capitalize on opportunities in alternative proteins. We also provide industry support to entrepreneurs and startups, as well as investors and financial institutions. And finally, our policy team advocates for fair regulation of plant-based and cultivated meat, and lobbies for government investment in sustainable protein R&D. We also have offices around the globe, with offices in nearly 6 countries, including Brazil, India, Israel, Europe, and Asia Pacific. Next slide, please. The key question we're working to address is, how will we feed 10 billion people by 2050? And how do we do this in a way that's sustainable, efficient, and safe? Industrial animal agriculture is responsible for almost 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions. It uses 75% of agricultural land, and yet it only provides 33% of the global protein supply. It's also the #1 user of medically important antibiotics. Next slide, please. We believe the answer is to make meat, egg, and dairy products that people love in a more sustainable and efficient way by using alternative proteins. We can make proteins directly from plants with fermentation technology or using animal cell culture. We'll be focusing on plant-based for today's presentation. It's worth noting that fermentation is increasingly being used as an enabling technology for the alternative protein industry. And finally, there's cultivated meat, also known as cell-based or cultured meat, which is made by growing animal cells outside of the animal. So that's our overview of the Good Food Institute at a high level. I would now like to hand it off to Felipe, who will look into more detail on the Brazilian plant-based market. Thank you so much, Felipe.
Thank you so much for doing this introduction, Kyle. Thank you for this project where you are basically calling all of the countries that we are working to be speaking, to be presenting our countries here. Yeah, as you may know, since this may be the first time that most of the people that are here are seeing Brazil, we also brought some really general information and specific information that you may know just to be preparing you for the next slides where we will be presenting the overview of our plant-based market. So when you look at Brazil, you're basically looking at a really large country. So there are basically many European countries inside of our area, as if you look at the size of these countries. So there are too many people, the country is large, and the agribusiness and the food industry is really present in the region as well. I'll be going through these numbers here with you, but just to give you an intro our population is based on 212 million people. Another interesting fact of Brazil is that even though we have so many people, we actually have the second largest livestock of animals in the world when you look at cattle. So Brazil, for example, have over 220 millions of cattle in the country. So I mean, we totally want you to remember us in GFI when you think about Brazil. But basically, if you think about it, we have more cattle than people in the country. And as you see, agribusiness basically composes 21% of Brazil's GDP. This is really huge and it's a really relevant and mandatory attitude and economy activity in the country. At the same time that the food industry composes almost 10% of Brazil's GDP. So again, if you add these numbers, you're going to see that over 30% of the GDP of Brazil, of our economy, is based on what we work in GFI. So this is really huge, and this is something really delicate to deal with when you're looking in Brazil. And just to give you a comparison, when you compare it with the United States, which is a really huge country, actually, if you add food industry and the agribusiness itself, you're going to have 5% of the GDP of the US. So again, even though the GDP of US is much higher, if you compare these numbers, you're going to see that if you remove the food industry and agribusiness from Brazil, you're actually going to have a much higher impact in its economy than you do in the United States. These are also really important takeaways that you should have when you think about us. So basically, the meat culture of Brazil is really high. And there's a lot of numbers that show us this. I mean, why this happened. So Brazil, as you may be aware of, is the second largest red meat producer in the world. We are the third poultry meat producer. We are the first red and poultry meat exporter in the entire world. At the same time that 80% of this meat is actually consumed internally in the country. So if you think about it, like even though there are so much meat being sold into the entire world, it's really common to many countries to be eating Brazilian products, especially animal proteins products. You're actually going to see Brazilians eating so much meat. And this is something really common in South American countries. But Brazil is definitely a special case because the area is really large. Most of the cattle here are pasture raised as well. And if you see, this is also something really transparent when you're looking at the GHG emissions of the country. So basically 70% of Brazil's emissions are from animal agriculture. And when you compare these numbers with the United States, you again are going to see higher numbers in the United States when you look at the big picture. But when you break down these numbers, you're going to see that animal industry is definitely something much more influent in Brazil than other countries, such as really developed countries such as the United States. So here, if you add the 51% of the deforestation and the agribusiness, which is more almost 22% of the GHG emissions, you're going to have over 70% of our GHG emissions coming from the animal industry itself. So again, even though the number is not as high as the United States, the importance of this activity in Brazil is really high. So there's no way that you can talk about Brazil without mentioning its agribusiness impact and its agribusiness importance and relevance for the economy of the country. So these are the main topics that I wanted to show you about Brazil, because now we're definitely going to be go over the plant-based market overview. We're going to be showing you some data on what the companies are doing, what are the products that we are seeing in the market, what is happening, what happened since this market began in the country. But now, again, you also know that animal industry in the country and agriculture is something really relevant for us. And to start, here is what we have in just 1 year of this market in the country. So basically, even though Brazil started, behind in this plant-based race, we actually have now the largest meat companies, the large food companies, the largest ingredient companies, and some really important and relevant startups which began to be operating in 2019, which are basically global right now. And these are really common companies to be seen in the entire land of Brazil. And we actually have some companies that are expanding their business to countries such as the United States. Fazenda Futuro, for example, Future Farm, the first startup here, is already selling their products in Europe and are also going to be selling their products in the United States. We also have the case of GBS, which is going to be launching their products in the United States in the Planterra company through the Ozo brand, which is also another case of a Brazilian company going to the United States. And we also have the case of Notco, which is a company from Chile that is really present in Brazil, that is also going to be in the United States. So again, this is just 1 year of the big picture that we have in Brazil. So in 1 year of the market, we have the largest companies entering the market and largest companies being really present in the sector. And this shows us how Brazilians are really good executing their business plans and to be focusing on these expansions, not even in the national land, but also going internationally. These are the examples of the largest meat companies that I just showed you on the previous slide. So GBS started with their Incredible Burger, and since the success of this burger was really high, they actually launched an entire line of products called the Incredible line, the Incredible products, and with the Incredible Lab in Brazil. And this was a really successful case as well. BRF, they also have their line called Vegetal in Portuguese. And we have Marfrig that, unlike GBS and BRF, that started going within the retail, actually have their product launched in basically in all of the Burger Kings of Brazil. So if you come here to Brazil and if you want to eat plant-based foods, and if you don't have time, if you want to go to a fast food, you definitely can go to Burger King and order a Rubber Whopper, and you're going to be seeing their burgers in there. When you look at the big picture of retailers and food services, we are actually seeing retailers being really successful when selling these products. So we have the case of GPA here, which actually showed us an amazing report arguing that 1/3 of their entire burgers sales in Brazil are actually plant-based right now. So again, this is really impressive when you're seeing that we are talking about a market that has just 1 year. And this is something really amazing to be thinking about, because we did not have any case of a meat analog in Brazil back then. And nowadays we have these numbers. So this is really impressive to be a Brazilian and to be looking forward of the transformation of the food industry. And when you look at the food service case, you're actually seeing there are all of these players here entering the market. So again, we have the case of Burger King offering Rebel Whoppers. We have Bob selling burgers of Fazenda Futuro. We have Subway selling products from GBS. So we're actually seeing the food services just starting and beginning to appear in this area. And this is something really relevant to be talking to companies and to any stakeholder that are looking forward to sell their products in food service. Because even though when we look at meat analogs and meat substitutes, we're definitely saying that these products have the same attributes as meat, as animal products. But when you look at the application of these products in food services, they may be really different. So there's a huge difference on how you're going to be dealing a plant-based burger in a large food chain such as Burger King. There is a different way that you're going to be eating meat when you get, for example, a shelf-stable meat to be selling in your food services. So this is something really different that the food service really needs to be preparing itself to be selling. So if you're a company and if you're starting a business and you're looking forward to be selling in food service, especially in Brazil, you definitely need to be looking forward to what are their main challenges that they have and what do they need when they are looking forward to be selling and be offering plant-based solutions in there. When you look at the venture capital world in Brazil, again, this is something really recent, but these are the main players that are acting in this sector. And we actually have a case here that what was a really large investment fund that actually really created just an investment arm to be focused in alternative proteins, and they were really successful in doing so. And we also have just a few cases of startups that raised capital money here, venture capital money, but they are really successful in doing so. So again, for example, we had the case in 2019 of Fazenda Futuro, a company that in less than 6 months was valuated in $100 million. And then after selling and after performing for 1 year, they raised their Series B in 2020, and they raised over $100 million in this next round. So again, we have over 100 million reais in venture capital, which is something really small when you look at the big picture. But again, we're talking about the recent market where all of these investors were not prepared and they are just getting to know this industry. So this really showed us a huge opportunity for, really start new startups be looking forward for venture capitalists, since investors are really willing to invest money in groundbreaking startups in Brazil. When we look at consumer research in Brazil, this is something really huge, because there's no way that we would have this amazing evolution of the market without thinking about the consumers, especially when you look at Brazilian culture. So this is something really special and something really dense to be looking forward to. Again, in our research in 2018, for instance, we did the research with Snapcart, which was an app, a mobile app research company. We asked the respondents what were the main attributes that they were looking forward to be desired in plant-based products. And taste, price, and convenience, again, always appear as the first most important ones when you're looking at these products. And we had a really similar research performed in South America now in 2020. So if you see here, this is a really recent research. You're seeing that price, taste, and convenience is appearing as first again, but now you're seeing that price is something really dense and something that more delicate than it was used to be in 2018. So now we have 61% of the people that are willing to buy more plant-based foods really worried about price. So these, of course, these may be affected by the pandemic, because it's really well known to many countries to be thinking about more affordable products, more popular products, since we have this global crisis of many countries' economy. But at the same time, to show us that taste and convenience stays as really important aspects when you think about these products. When you think about the main driver of South Americans in Brazil, about South Americans, I'll be showing you some data on Brazil as well, because when you think about South America, it's really common to see drivers of any South American countries to be appearing in another country as well. So if you see here, you can definitely think about Brazil when you're seeing these numbers. And as you can see, you see health reasons as the most important driver for flexitarians and for people who are really willing to purchase more plant-based foods to be doing so. So health reasons, nutrition, and to try new flavors, so to try new food is definitely the first reasons on why South Americans are willing to be trying more plant-based foods at this moment. And we look at only Brazil, we had a very similar questions back in 2018 when we didn't have this really well-developed market, and we had over 50% of the people, actually 59% of the people saying that health concerns were the main reason for reducing their meat consumptions. And if you add the number of health restrictions, you're going to get over 70% of this number on why people are reducing their meat consumption. So again, health is always appearing as the first driver on why people are doing this. So if you mix health with how the meat culture in Brazil is really high, you're definitely going to be thinking about alternative proteins. So you have this country that really adores and really loves to eat meat, and they really adore this because they have events only focused on these proteins, and they have so many holidays that start to sell these products. And when you see, you have this driver of health in the country, in the region as well. So this is really huge, and this is definitely an assumption to tell us why we're seeing a really boost in the alternative proteins in Brazil as the way that we saw from 2019 to 2020. The percentage of Brazilians' interest in plant-based foods increased by almost 30% from 2019 to 2020. So if you look at this data, this was actually the same question that was asked in different research. So if you look at the number of DuPont from 2019, that was actually performed in December of 2019, we had almost 70% of Brazilians saying that they are more interested in plant-based foods in the country. And when you see this data from 2020, that it was a research performed by Ingredient, they released this research in September of this year. We saw that 90% of Brazilians are more interested in plant-based foods. So if you ever receive that questions asking if the plant-based sector in Brazil is saturated and we have so many products and that it doesn't make sense to be offering more, it's definitely the opposite, because you saw a market that grew exponentially from 2019 to 2020, and you actually saw the trends of the consumers increasing as well. So this is something really huge to be thinking about. Even though we are not going to go over cultivated meat here, we definitely wanted to bring you the results of our naming study that was performed in Brazil. So if you have never heard about what a naming study is basically, since you know the words that we have, which are plant-based and cultivated meat, these words are in English. So these may not be as popular as it seems in Brazil, because you know Brazil is a country that speaks Brazilian Portuguese. So there was this need to bring these words to Brazil culture, to Brazil's economy, and to Brazil's society. So we performed a study that we asked so many respondents to be thinking and to be looking at the correct words to be using, and words that would describe these products to consumers in the best way possible, at the same time that this product would be something really attractive for these consumers. And of course, a word that would be really safe when you're thinking regulatory marks in the country. So here in the first insight, we got that over almost 80% of Brazilians, more than 80% of Brazilians are really willing to try plant-based meats. Of course, we saw this in the previous slides. We saw that most of them are also willing to buy. We also have more than the half willing to replace meat products for plant-based products. And we also have a smaller number here saying that they would be willing to pay more for plant-based products. Again, price now is something really sensitive, especially after the pandemic. During the pandemic, but since even though we have a huge number of people saying these things, and this is really a positive feedback for the country. And when you're looking at cultivated meat, you're seeing really similar data as plant-based. So you're seeing that the majority are willing to try, to buy, and to even to replace. And even though the number for be paying more is low, we're actually seeing a product that doesn't even exist in Brazilian in the market, in any market of the world. But Brazilians are actually really willing to be trying this and to be tasting cultivated meat. And for the final insight from the naming study, we asked the consumers, we asked the respondents to be connecting what they think about plant-based or cultivated meats to a number and a variety of attributes. And as you can see here, most of them are really similar, but we actually saw more positive feedback for plant-based rather than cultivated meat. This may be because cultivated meat is not in the market. This is something really far away from the reality of Brazil at this very moment. But at the same time, this shows us that the majority of people are having more positive feedback rather than negative feedback of this product. And for plant-based, this is really, really positive, right? Because as you saw, our market is more developed and it's growing really in really exponential levels. So people see plant-based as healthy, nutritious, natural, sustainable, good for animals, affordable, attractive, and so many other interesting things. So these ends of the part of the presentation that we are talking about consumer research. And now we're jumping to the final part, where we will be talking about opportunities and challenges that we have in this industry. So if you think back in 2017, which was the year that GFI started to work in Brazil, it was actually the year that companies and stakeholders in the industry was definitely thinking about joining this industry. And this happened in the background from 2017, 2018, and we saw the final products, really good products in 2019. So this shows that GFI is really proud, and we are really glad that we were able to accompany the industry in these steps. So we saw what happened, we were there, and these actually tell us that there are so many things that we can learn, and there are so many things that we are observing, which are special things in the Brazilian landscape, which I'm going to be presenting you now in the final part of the presentation. So to start, this is the number of ag techs and food techs when you compare Brazil to the United States. And if you jump to the beginning of the presentation, again, you are going to remember that the food industry in Brazil is really relevant. It's even more relevant than the United States. Again, the numbers are lower, but if you look proportionally to the numbers, it's going to be more important to its economy. But even though it's more important, we are actually seeing a really smaller number of food techs acting in the company if you compare it to the United States. And as you know, agribusiness is really relevant to the country. And Brazil is also really well known in Latin America to be hosting really great ag techs in the region. So we already have a landscape and a really robust ecosystem focused on ag techs, but we still need a robust ecosystem to be focusing on food tech as well. There's no way in 2020 that you're going to be thinking about the production level, so you're thinking ag techs in agriculture, without thinking about final products. So there's a huge opportunity here to be connecting and to be thinking about food techs in Brazil. This is a really more special case when you see and when you study on how some really successful companies started in other countries. So I brought the case here of Memphis Meats in the United States and Mosa Meat in the Netherlands. We also have so many other cases, but I just showed you, I just brought you these just to be proving this point. But Memphis Meats, for instance, wouldn't exist without IndieBio. IndieBio is a really common accelerator, a biotechnology accelerator based in San Francisco. And this was the first place that Memphis Meats was incubated. So this was really relevant for Memphis Meats to exist. And the Brightlands, it happened the same thing to Mosa Meat. The only difference between IndieBio is not Brightlands. Brightlands offers solutions focused on international connections and something more tailor-made to what Mosa Meat was needing at the time. But you think about this, you're going to be seeing that facilitators that exist in each country are really important to be growing more startups, especially really innovative and disruptive startups in each country. So we can see cases again from Memphis Meat, from Mosa Meat, but we could add other startups here, such as Notco, such as Ella Farms, and others. So again, when you have the environment and you have the facilitators, you're going to be enabling entrepreneurs to be growing these startups in the region. Another thing is that the innovation sector in Brazil is really urging for more players to be dealing with this. So, for example, our ag tech community is really strong. So this shows us that we already have the landscape, which is focused on ag techs, but at the same time, it shows us that we're not working the way that we should with food techs in the country. So even though Brazil is maybe the largest soy producer in the entire world, you're not seeing so many ingredient varieties in the country as it should be seen. So you're seeing many startups and seeing many companies in Brazil actually having to be importing pea from other countries because it is not planting and it's not be thinking about the final product. So you're seeing ag techs, you're seeing producers, you're seeing agriculture, which is just producing what they were already used to, and you're seeing food techs and companies that are really willing to be looking for these ingredients in the country, but they are not being able to, because the only thing that we have, and it is really common in the country for now, in our industry, are soy and other grains that we are still not using as we should in this industry. And the other thing is ingredients varieties. So Brazil hosts so many forests and so many different biomes that doesn't exist in the rest of the world. So if you think about the Amazon, for instance, which is a tropical forest in the country, you're definitely going to be seeing ingredients there that doesn't exist anywhere. That doesn't exist here. So this is really relevant as well, because there's a huge opportunity to be working with ingredients in the country, because we have a great land, we have a great community of agricultures, of farmers, but we're not seeing the middle players here that are connecting the producing capabilities to the final products. So this is really another relevant challenge and opportunity that we would like to give you. For another thing is that the low value of the Brazilian real may actually show a really great opportunity for international investors if you're thinking about Brazil right now. So let's say that you are a startup, or that you're an investor, or that you're a company that are really willing to be buying assets in the country. So you're basically seeing a coin right now that is basically, if you invest $1 in Brazil, you will be getting 5 times, almost 6 times the number of the assets that you would have in other country that you would pay in dollars. So this means that you will be buying so much more assets, so many more interesting and real things in the country, to be building facilities, to be building startups, for building business, that you would do if you would invest this money in other countries or other areas that you would have to use dollars or even euros. So again, the trends, this is not we do not want to give you a slide with an investment suggestion. This is not what it is, but we're just saying and showing you some data that you should see that the value of our coin has never been so low. And this may also be an opportunity, since we are talking about the market that is global, and there is no way that you can talk about alternative protein sector, even plant-based, fermentation, or cultivated meat, without thinking internationally. So we have all the countries, we have each country has its strengths, each country has its weakness, and we should be joining ourselves to be connecting what we already have and which we could have, that we could be building these bridges to help each other, and for building a better ecosystem to grow this industry the best way possible. So this is really quick takeaways that I want to give you for this presentation. So again, back in the first slides, if you see Brazil, we have a really strong meat culture, plus we have strong health trends in the country, which means, and these may have a big assumption showing that alternative proteins is skyrocketing in the country. So this is something really relevant when you think about our country. We have a really recent market, and we are already among the highest growths in the world. So again, this shows how Brazilian business are able to execute their business pretty well. And it's also showing that industry is being able to connect itself to the consumers. So they are selling what the consumers want, and this is growing really fast. Another thing is that the market is urging for innovation, both in ingredients and in new technologies. So I showed you how many startups we have and how many room we have for more growth, and how important this industry is to Brazil when you compare it to more developed countries such as the United States. And we also urge for a more robust ecosystem to host groundbreaking startups. So even though we have the demand for this business to happen in Brazil, we still do not have the facilitators, such as other countries that are really strong in this path, such as the United States, such as Rio, such as Singapore, such as Hong Kong, and other countries. So these really show us that there's a huge opportunity to be working in all of these spaces in Brazil. And I really hope that most of you have enjoyed what we showed you. At the same time, I enjoyed giving this presentation. These are the links of our State of the Industry focused in Brazil. This is my contact here, Felipe Krelling. I work with the corporate engagement team in Brazil. And this is Kyle's contact. And thank you so much for this, everyone. Kyle, I'll be kicking the ball for you right now. Thank you for all of this.
Great. Thank you so much, Felipe, for going over all that information. It's very helpful. So now we'll go into our Q&A session to answer some of the questions that we've received during the course of the webinar. To start, Felipe, do you know, is Brazilian soy also used as feedstock for cattle, similar to how soy is used for feedstock in the European Union?
Yes, it is. This is also a really common thing in Brazil. So basically 90% of the soy that we have in the country is GMO, and most of the soy is used for cattle as well. We have some numbers, all of them are different, but all of them are unanimous, saying that over 60% of the soy that is used in Brazil is actually used for animal rations, both for cattle, for pigs, and especially for chicken. So I'm not saying that the same soy that humans eat in Brazil is the same soy that we're using for animal feeding, but I'm saying that, yeah, totally, soy is a really common ingredient to be using to be feeding animals.
Great, thanks, Felipe. Just as a reminder to attendees, if you have questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to enter questions into that box, and we will get to them over the course of this next 10 or 15 minutes. All right, the next question, Felipe. Do you know how many consumers in Brazil live in big cities?
So we didn't specify this in the research that we made, but we are seeing that some regions in Brazil actually have a higher number of consumers than other regions, especially the southeast of Brazil. The southeast and the south of Brazil are really regions that show us higher numbers and higher amounts of people that are really willing to be eating more of these products. And we're actually seeing most of the products that are being launched in Brazil, they are starting to be launched in these regions rather than other regions in the country. But at the same time, we're seeing that even though I know I'm showing you the largest numbers, all of the numbers from other regions show us really important and really opportunities to be working down there as well. So again, the number is higher, but the other numbers are really high as well.
And just based off some quick research I did, broadly across Brazil, it looks like roughly 80 to 86% of folks live in urban cities generally. But the breakdown of small to big cities is something I'm not clear on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Felipe, for answering that question.
Yeah.
Some follow-up questions on the study that you conducted with the University of Bath. Do you have a breakdown of age demographics for those consumer acceptance of plant-based and cultivated meat graphs that you showed?
Yeah, we do. We didn't specify that in the study that we performed, but we definitely are able to be sharing these numbers to any stakeholder if would be something relevant. But for now, we can say that this study was performed in a really direct demographic of Brazil. So this number actually represents of what Brazilians think. So this was made for all of genders, all ages, all social classes, all regions, urban and rural areas. So it's really split it, and we actually got the number really, really in the Brazilian way. So these were actually what Brazilians think about these words and what they think about this industry. I mean, about these products.
Great, thank you, Felipe. And for folks interested in that demographic data, if you could just follow up with Felipe using his email address on the screen, we can follow up with you after this webinar. All right, the next question. What is the most common base ingredient of plant-based meats for Brazilian plant-based meat products?
Oh, that would definitely be soy. So soy is the ingredient that we see in all the regions in the country. So most of the products that you look for in this industry here are basically using soy. Because again, we are now in 2020, we are really looking and we are really worried about price and the cost of trying products. So it's really more expensive to be buying products that are being imported from other countries. So if you have this ingredient that is here and it's being able to perform really well. So for example, all of these companies are using soy and they are performing really well. with Brazilian consumers and even international consumers, since some of these companies are selling, to Europe and it's already going to the United States. We're still using soy. But again, we still have so much more room and space to be looking forward for ingredient varieties in the country.
A related question, do you know if the Futuro brand burgers are also made with soy?
Yeah, they are. They actually use a mix of some ingredients such as pea. It has pea as well, but it uses soy.
And then we have a question about consumer perceptions of soy, which I can speak to, which is generally a majority of consumers, at least based off the studies I've seen in the US, do not have a negative perception of soy. And if we look to products like the Impossible Burger, which are made with soy, those products are performing quite well on the market with high sales growth. So I would suggest that consumers aren't necessarily put off by soy being an ingredient. But Felipe, if you have any other thoughts on that question for the Brazilian market specifically, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, this is a great answer as well, Kyle. My main feedback for now is that we do not have a correct number from a research showing the perceptions for soy at this very moment. But we do have the case of all of these companies that are being really successful on what they are doing. They're actually expanding to the entire world. And we know that they are using soy. So if consumers are buying these products and all of these products have soy, the only feedback and the conclusion that we can get from this is that soy is not being seen as a negative feedback from consumers. So we're seeing that they are accepting soy really well as well.
Great. One more question on that topic. Are there any thoughts that you have on soy and its status as an allergen? Has that been a concern that you've noticed?
Again, I think that the thing that all these companies are using soy, it shows us that it's possible to be selling products with soy. I mean, all of the people are buying it. But at the same time, most of the companies that are working in this sector is really worried about more inclusive ways to be feeding more people. So how can we get more consumers? How can we find consumers that are still not eating our products? So this is actually a real concern, not just for startups, but for large companies as well. So yeah, this is a concern. But again, I think that the number on how many people are buying this product that has soy already justifies that people are not so worried about soy in the country.
Great. So similar question to the supply of plant protein. Do you know if the products that were shown in the presentation are using plant-based proteins that were grown in Brazil, or do you think that they're being imported?
So yeah, we do share. That's something that is really public. So some of these products are importing ingredients, and that's something that it's open for the public for sure. But most of them, I mean, again, if you want to be selling a cheaper product and a more accessible product, you're definitely going to be looking forward in an ingredient that is being grown in Brazil rather than buying from other countries.
And then for those ingredients that are being produced in Brazil, do you have any examples of companies that are producing those protein isolates and other plant-based proteins?
Yeah, so basically all of the ingredient companies are working with these ingredients. So if you look for a really well-known ingredient company in Brazil that basically are multinational companies as well, you're definitely going to be seeing that they are already working with ingredients that we do not have in so much scale in the country, such as peas, chickpeas, and even beans. But at the same time, they're also working with soy. So I mean, the problem is not if they are able to be working with this product. The issue is if you are able to find this ingredient in a really cheap and more accessible way. So the concern here is not technology itself, but the concern is with the final cost of the final product.
Great, thank you, Felipe. All right, taking a step back from plant-based meat, are there any other types of plant-based products on the Brazilian market that are having success right now?
Yeah, definitely. We just showed some examples here. We were basically talking about and showing examples of plant-based meat, but we have, for example, large companies sell that used to are actually the largest companies that are used to selling eggs, that are selling egg substitutes in the country, and these companies are being really successful in doing so. We have companies that are selling different types of frozen products, such as chicken patties, such as a really well-known Brazilian product, but I think that most of the people here wouldn't know, which is called kibe, which is basically a processed type of food of meat. So yeah, we definitely have more solutions rather than just burger. We were actually asking ourselves when we were bringing this with all of these trends to Brazil, if we would have a burger first. And yeah, we had the burgers. We have a lot of burgers. I'm not saying that there's no room for more burgers, but yeah, we do have so many or more options that we didn't show here in this presentation.
Great, thank you, Felipe. We had a question that was, it was mentioning that your cattle production and pasture raising is a cause of deforestation. It also asked about any other potential benefits. So I can speak to that slightly, at least at a global level, which is we know that there's a lot of antibiotic usage with animal agriculture. So by reducing our reliance on it, we can hopefully reduce the use of antibiotics, and reduce the risk of creating a superbug. We also know that there's many other environmental effects, such as just loss of biodiversity. So for example, when we have deforestation in the Amazon, that also threatens the habitats for all the animals who live in the Amazon. And so we see the same effect around the world, whether it's through overfishing or through land use in other countries. And then finally, there's just on an individual level, just the health benefits of a more plant-forward diet. So these are just some examples of the benefits of plant-based foods and alternative protein industries. Felipe, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that you covered it all. I would just say that the difference between of Brazil from other developed countries such as the United States is that we still do a lot of cattle raising here, focused on pasture. So unlike the United States that has really strong factory farming, we still have so many cattle that are raised outside, which has a lot of upsides and downsides, such as like you are going to be using so much more land, you're going to be deforesting more, but at the same time, you wouldn't have so many issues on, on isolating animals, such as with antibiotics and all of these things as well. But we definitely share your feedback on this, Kyle.
All right, so I think just a few quick clarifying questions. So one question is if Notco, the Chilean brand, is operating in Brazil? I believe the answer is yes. Is that correct, Felipe?
Yeah, it is.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, they have an office in Brazil. They are actually also manufacturing in Brazil as well. So as you know, Notco is from Chile, but they came to Brazil in a really short time span. It was really quick the way that they came here. They came selling mayonnaise. They are now also selling milk, and they're also selling burger in small food services. But they are actually here already. And as I said in the presentation, they are also going to be moving forward to the United States.
Great, thank you. We have a couple questions about consumer interest in plant-based dairy, cheese, and milk, but I think you touched on that with your earlier question. But just to confirm, it sounds like Brazilian customers are interested in those other plant-based categories. Would you agree with that, Felipe?
Oh yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say that the state of the dairy alternative industry in Brazil is the same as other countries. For example, that we have really popular and accessible plant-based cheeses that uses fermentation and other types of technologies. But I would say that people are really willing to buy more of these products as well. But from our standpoint on this is that we are really urging for more innovation in the space as well. So to use different ingredients, we're using different methodologies, different production levels, different production ways to be looking forward for different cheeses, plant-based cheeses in Brazil. So yeah, the demand is here, and there's a lot of room to have more suppliers for these products in the country.
Great, thank you. We have a couple questions about the size of the plant-based market in Brazil. Based off my understanding, it sounds like the market's very young, and so there's not necessarily enough data available. But I'll let Felipe speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Yeah, that's what it is. The market's really recent, so Brazil was not aware, and Brazil didn't know what a plant-based burger was in 2019, for example. This is something really nice for us because back in 2018, a plant-based burger was basically that, that plant-based burger that bleeds. And the only startups that you think when you were thinking about this was Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. But nowadays, in 2020, when you say plant-based burger for the industry in Brazil, you're definitely going to be thinking about so many products here. But at the same time, it's a really young market. So it's pretty soon to be talking about market size, and all these things.
Great. And then do you have a sense of just how many alternative protein companies might be operating in Brazil? No worries if not, but just curious if you have like a general number.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have our database in GFI, so we know how many startups looked for us, meant to be talking to us, other startups that we just found and we were mapping them. And this number came close to 130. But we are not going to be saying that this is the exact or final number on this. And this is far from being accurate because, again, Brazil is a really large country. We do not have these really national grasp of the entire startup community yet, but we are definitely seeing over 100 startups working in the space already. And I'm not mentioning the large industry in this. I'm just talking about the startups, but the large industry itself, you basically have the largest players already offering solutions and lines of products in the industry already.
Great. Do you know, in terms of demographics, do you know the split of Brazilian consumers? What percentage of those are vegetarians, vegans, and flexitarians?
Talking about regions, we know from some research, especially the one that we performed in 2018 with Snapcart, we see that, again, Southeast tends to have more vegans and even flexitarians, but this number is actually really present in the Northeast part of the country as well. So you see so many vegans and vegetarians in the Northeast part at the same time that you see in the Southeast. But it's a really delicate number to be talking about because the motivation of this public is something really common, and it's really hard to be splitting them in some groups because their motivations are really, really similar, and it's something really subjective. So there are a lot of people, for example, in Brazil that, a vegetarian, it's someone that eats fish, and a vegetarian, somebody that eats cheese or even pork. But there are others that, a vegetarian doesn't eat anything like that, doesn't eat animals. So there's still this subjective barrier for this. But I would say that I would definitely think about Southeast, South, and the Northeast part of the country.
Great. And did you happen to have like a percentage number, say like 10% or less, that you would estimate are vegans, vegetarians, and flexitarians?
There's some research from Ibope that shows that 14% of Brazilians declare themselves as vegetarians. And we have our research from Snapcart from 2018 showing that 30% of Brazilians are reducing their meat consumption. So we should assume that these people are flexitarians. And we have almost 6% of Brazilians in our research in 2018 showing that Brazilians are not consuming any meat product at all. So we should call these people as vegans, for instance.
Great. And something I do want to highlight is that, while vegans, vegetarians, and flexitarians are consumers who would be interested in these plant-based products, it's also important to note that 90% plus of consumers who are buying plant-based products also eat animal-based products. So it's not just limited to vegans, vegetarians, and flexitarians. In fact, these products appeal more broadly to the larger consumer demographics. Just data from the US specifically, Beyond Meat reported that 90% plus of people who were buying Beyond Meat in retail stores were also buying animal-based meat. And so there's just more evidence that these products have very broad consumer appeal. Yeah, thank you very much, Felipe.
I also want to add something like in that, Kyle. This is really interesting what you just said. We actually have some research showing that I couldn't remember the name of the report. I think that it was DuPont saying this, but back in 2019, 90% of the people that were buying plant-based burgers in Brazil, these people actually consume meat regularly in their diets. So again, we're not talking about vegans or vegetarians or even flexitarians, because we are talking about people that eat so much meat. Again, Brazil is a really strong culture in the meat culture. So we totally share your feedback, and we see this happening in Brazil as well.
So another question, someone would like to know if there's any companies that are currently using 3D printing in product development, or if it's a technology that will perhaps be used in the future. So I'll speak to the second half of that question, which is, we do have examples of companies like Novameat, I believe, in Spain, that are using 3D printing with plant-based meat. And then we also have companies like 3D bioprinting, which are partnering with other alternative protein companies to produce 3D printed cultivated meat. So at least at a global perspective, it's certainly a technology that companies are looking into, and one that has potential to help create the more fibrous whole muscle type products that consumers are looking for. But in terms of Brazil, I'll hand it over to Felipe in case you have any insight on the Brazil market specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Well, here we do not have any case of a startup producing meat, plant-based, cultivated meat, or even fermentation using 3D printing. But we have other cases of startups and companies that are using 3D technologies in other business sectors, such as producing organs, or even working, with the pandemic and assisting public and even private companies with this, that are working with 3D printing. And these startups, these companies are really interested to be working with the alternative protein sector. But again, we do not have a particular case of a startup that is just doing that. But if there is a startup or a company in Brazil that are looking forward to be working with 3D printing, there are some connections that we could do, where we could present who's already working with 3D printing.
Great, thank you, Felipe. Do you have any information about the regulatory situation in Brazil with regards to alternative proteins?
Yeah, so we have a person who is working as a director of policy in the country. We have been working with this since 2018, the end of 2018. And we are actually working with some government agencies. We already have a partnership with the ABBI, which is basically the Bioeconomy Association of the government. So we are doing a lot of things. We are really investing our time and our efforts in this. But for now, we do have a lot of regulations focused on plant-based products. This regulation is something that is not so much specific. So again, if you're going to be selling plant-based products in Brazil, you're going to be put in the last line of the other products, because we do not have something special and really specialized for plant-based products. And for cultivated meat, this is a really novel ingredient from Brazil. So this is something that should be done, and this is being done from the scratch. So still nothing for cultivated meat, and plant-based meat, we still have what we already had in the industry back in 30 years ago.
Great. And just one last administrative question, Felipe. Do you have a version of the Brazilian State of the Industry report that is in English?
Unfortunately, no. The only version that we have is this one that is in Portuguese. but we are definitely thinking and we are considering in releasing our State of the Industry in 2021, which is going to be in English as well. So this is something that we are considering. We just did this report thinking about the Brazilian industry itself, so we didn't have a very global mind at the time, but now we are really considering doing this as well. But thank you for the interest in asking this.
Great. Thank you so much, Felipe. So we're now 2 minutes past the hour. So unfortunately, we're out of time. And I know we do have some more questions left. So for those of you who we were not able to answer your question today, I'll leave this the screen up for a couple of minutes so you can capture our contact information and follow up with us directly. Thank you so much to Felipe for your time and your expertise on today's webinar. Everything you had to say was very valuable. And thank you to everyone who attended today. I hope that you found this webinar impactful and very insightful.
Oh, thank you so much for everything, Kyle. This was really a great conduction of the webinar. The idea is amazing. And thank you for doing and for inviting us here. And thank you for everyone that was here that joined us today to be looking forward in Brazil and to be seeing why we tend to be leading the alternative protein sector as well. Thank you so much for this.
Great. Thank you again, Felipe. And to everyone else, I'll leave the screen up for just a couple of minutes. You can grab our contact info. Otherwise, we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.